Okay, I'm ready.
Okay, well, we are back at the World Autism Summit with Chris Abdilgaard, and he is an EDD, NCSP, LPC, NCC, and is the owner and director of the Social Learning Center located in Cheshire, Connecticut. And Chris earned his Doctor of Education in School Psychology from Loyola University, Chicago, is nationally certified school psychologist and a licensed professional counselor with a specialization in autism spectrum disorders and neurodiverse learners. Chris holds a graduate certificate from the University of Massachusetts, Lowell, in behavioral interventions and autism. In addition to his clinical consultation and supervision duties at the SLC, Chris teaches at several top universities in Connecticut. He has been adjunct professor in the psychology department at the University of Hartford and currently heavily involved as an adjunct professor in the special education department at the University of St. Joseph, USI. His duties at both universities include teaching, curriculum development, and supervision. So,
Yes.
welcome, Chris.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm excited and looking forward to this.
Yes, we are really, really happy to have you here.
Thank you.
So tell me what got you involved in being involved with the World Autism Summit?
Well, Karen, that's a great question. I believe strongly in being able to promote learning and to talk about all the things that us as professionals are learning day to day when we're with our clients or students. And what a better platform. I mean, I couldn't think of a better platform than to talk about some of the things that I am seeing here at the clinic, some of the things that I am noticing out in schools right now, and be able to just share my knowledge, share what we are learning with the hopes of, bettering, empowering, kind of moving our field forward. The World's, Autism Summit, allows us to do that and bring a whole host of different professionals and brains together so that we can better, our neurodiverse community.
That's wonderful. We want to make a global impact and we want to
Mhm.
really move this needle forward in a very big way. And so, how do you hope to make the biggest impact in your area of expertise globally?
Oh, I never thought if you told my kids that their father would be doing something that might have a global impact, they wouldn't believe you. But it's really about helping people understand where we are in our world today as it relates to neurodiverse learners. It's about giving permission to people to ask questions that they have been wondering about how neurodiverse learners think, how they interact. It's about not. It's about helping people to not be afraid to inquire how different brains operate. And if I can do that just a little bit and promote that in some way, then I think I'm doing a good job.
Yeah, it's about seeing from different perspectives, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
what is your biggest why for what you do?
What is the biggest why?
Mhm.
One of the things I'll talk about in a little bit, Karen, is that I met my first person with autism back in 1999, and I fell in love with the field. I was interested. I was inquisitive. Um, I am a lifelong learner, and I think that has kind of propelled me to continue to ask that question, why? Why do students do what they do? Why do students maybe sometimes act the way they act? Why do parents and families, engage in certain activities with their children when they do? Why do teachers and other educators? Why do they sometimes, again, do the things they do? Um, you know, I I am passionate about this field. I am passionate about neurodiverse learners. And I think we are continually learning from our clients and learning from students with neurodiverse learning patterns. And I think every day is a different day in my world. I get to come to work and I know what's on my schedule, but every day I'm learning something new, Karen. And I think that's what really energizes me.
Yeah, we always learn something different from every different perspective, every different person. We always wonder what makes people tick. I know I always have.
Right.
What makes people motivated to do the things that they do. And I think other people really wonder why a person enters into a certain field, and what makes them get into it to begin with. So
Right.
thank you for that. Yeah. How can we set up systems of success? I always ask people, how can we set up systems of success? Because we're an unbiased platform. We want everybody to win. We want to break down silos and get other people to be involved in all of this. So how can we do that?
So how do we set up systems for success? I think, Karen, one of the best things we can do and continue to do is have these type of dialogues.
Mm-hmm.
I think that when we are, sometimes scared to open those dialogues between parents, educators, other professionals, you use the word silos.
Yes.
When we work in our own silos or when we work in our own boxes, Karen, that is not helping to move this needle. And we really need to be inviting different perspectives. We need to be inviting different professionals and families of all diverse backgrounds and cultures. And we need to be listening to their stories.
Mm-hmm.
When I work with other professionals and when I work with other counselors or school psychologists, one of the things I talk a lot about is invite the conversation, invite the stories of the families that you work with, because their stories are just as important, and their stories might fill in some gaps that you didn't know about. And that will help you to learn how to best work with the student. To kind of answer your question, it's really going to be about those conversations and the conversation around neurodiversity and being comfortable with talking about neurodiversity really needs to happen across all disciplines.
I think so. And different viewpoints are really important, because we can always have different opinions, but if we try to listen and understand and, share viewpoints and, listen with an open heart and an open mind, I think we can learn a lot.
Absolutely. I agree.
Now you get to share your slides. So I can ask you questions, other questions.
Yeah. So Karen and everybody else, thank you so much. I had a chance to put some thoughts together, and I wanted to share them with you, and hopefully Karen will help me as I go through this, because I have some questions of my own that, Karen, I was hoping you could join me in asking.
So to get this party started, I guess I would ask you, why did you get into this field of autism and neurodiversity, which we touched on a little bit, but I think we can, get more into it.
Yes. Yeah. Well, as I said, and as I shared with you, I met my first person with autism back in 1999. And I grew up in a household where my mother was a school teacher. My mother was a second grade teacher for almost 46 years. And so the field of education has always been kind of in my blood. And I've loved the field of education and psychology and mental health counseling. But there was this need, Karen, there's this need very early on that I saw for mental health and educational services for all neurodiverse learners. And in my area, here in Connecticut, there weren't many services back then. And it was something that, I saw as a need, and I really want to become more involved in, And then after Sandy Hook, after the tragedy here in Connecticut, I saw perceptions of neurodiverse individuals shift, right? Many of my clients became scared. Would they be seen as being violent or aggressive? And this really made me take pause Karen, and thinking about, okay, this is bigger than I actually originally thought. And so I really did. I wanted to become an advocate for neurodiverse learners and be able to provide mental health services and supports to individuals and families, as well as schools and other communities. But I recognized, Karen, very early on that we had to first kind of understand neurodiversity, and this movement and what this means for neurodiverse learners, you know. So, of course, as we know, neurodiversity describes the idea that people experience and interact with the world in many, many different ways, and that there's no right way of thinking, right? Learning and behaving differences should not be viewed as deficits. Now, of course, I'm talking about all this, and many of our listeners and viewers are saying, well, of course, that is true. But that's a mindset, Karen, that I think we have to sometimes be reminded of, that differences are not deficits.
Right.
And if we can remember that as educators and as counselors and as parents, that will really help us, drive, this field. As we know, the world, neurodiversity refers to the diversity of all people. And it's often used in the context when you're thinking about individuals with autism spectrum disorders, as well as other neurological or developmental conditions such as ADHD, and learning disabilities. So it's really important to kind of remember that piece. And it's also important to remember that we right now are in this kind of national crisis here in the United States, and I'm sure around the world, when it comes to students' mental health. When we think about mental health and we think about all of the things that our neurodiverse learners have to kind of go through, and all of our kids these days, growing up today is not like it was, 30, 40 years ago. When we place and we put our neurodiverse learners into classrooms and they're assumed to perform at a certain level, these are our students who often have to work harder to overcome some of their challenges, that might be stemming from their learning differences. A lot of the clients I work with and the students I consult on, they'll say, Dr. Chris, teachers tell me all the time, well, you're so smart, you should be able to. You should be able to this. You should be able to write that 3-paragraph essay, right? I have students that say to me, Dr. Chris, my talents don't matter if I can't do school. And Karen, right now, what I'm seeing is this loss of hope. And this loss of hope that I've talked about in the past, and I've worked with other professionals on. It's because of the pressure that is sometimes felt by our neurodiverse learners. And it's immense, Karen, and it is something that I think, we really need to be thinking more about, as we move forward in this field and helping to support our neurodiverse learners in all environments. Because, Karen, we don't want to see this. And we're seeing this every day at home and in school. We're seeing our kids shut down. And so I think with this summit, with other colleagues from around the world, we need to continue to think about how are we helping educators and parents avoid, having children that are feeling this way internally.
Yeah, that's important.
Yeah.
Yeah, so teachers and educators today are seeing such an increase in anxiety, depression among our neurodiverse students. Why is this, and how do you see school systems trying to address this issue?
That's a good question. That's a good question. And you know what, Karen, we're seeing so many different things, that are popping up in schools. I was meeting with a group of educators earlier today, Karen. And I was sharing with them that I have clients as young as 4 and 5 that are already coming in to see me on medication for anxiety. So we have anxiety, very common, and it could start as young as 5 years old, right? And it can start off as presenting with kind of somatic complaints, belly hurting, not feeling good, don't want to go to school. From a behavioral perspective, it may look very much like they're trying to avoid or escape something,
Mm-hmm.
right? And in extreme cases, when we have students that are experiencing just so much anxiety through their day, Karen, it is impacting their language and their functional communication. And I will have other professionals and parents say, but why can't they just use their words?
Hmm.
Why can't they just say this? It's because, Karen, they get flooded with all these anxious feelings, these anxious thoughts, and they can't access their words. And sometimes, Karen, all they can do is maybe swipe that piece of paper off the desk
Hmm.
because they're so anxious about having to write that essay. You know, as professionals and as people, we need to remember that these feelings many of us experience. We have to remember to normalize some of these feelings. We have to validate how our kids are feeling today because they're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
You know, social anxiety is another thing that is really prevalent right now in our schools. And we're seeing this as young as second and third graders. And it's this fear of being judged or constantly thought about or looked at funny, right? And all these things, they may lead to other things later in life, you know? And of course, once again, this creates this wave of emotion and language breaks down. And it could lead to shutdown, and then ultimately, internally and externally, different types of behaviors. So how do I see schools, addressing this? Depression is another one. Withdrawal, social isolation, lack of motivation. Thankfully, Karen, here in Connecticut, and of course around the country too, I have the opportunity to speak to other educators and other folks in different states. You know, there there are supports being put in place. There is a need for more supports to be put in place to help address anxiety and depression because it is something that is impacting our students. You know, how we put those things in place and what we call those types of interventions, you
Mm-hmm.
know, we can go back and forth on. But the reality is that they're there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the things that we are seeing with our students in schools are there.
Mm-hmm.
We as an education system, we as the mental health community have an obligation to put supports in place, um, and try to help in some way. The question I get asked out a lot is, where's this coming from? Has it always been there and we just haven't noticed it, Kim?
Hmm.
And I don't have a clear answer for that. Maybe it has been, and maybe it just is all bubbling to the surface, especially after the past, few years that everybody has gone through. You know?
Hmm.
The other thing, Karen, that kind of goes along hand in hand with all this is trauma, and stressors and different adverse childhood experiences. And the one comment I wanted to make today about this piece and how this impacts our neurodiverse learners is that sometimes we forget trauma can happen in different ways. Trauma can be internalized and interpreted differently based on what is actually happening to us, the learner.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I'm currently working with one student who was very anxious about going back to school because he was called out in class for not getting a math problem correct. And the
Mm.
teacher said to him, "Well, you're so smart, you should have gotten it correct. You need to work harder."
Hmm. Wow.
Karen, that statement to my client is traumatizing.
Right.
So although that sometimes we might forget, well, maybe they misinterpreted what the teacher was saying, or it really shouldn't have that big of an impact on that student.
But it
It
did.
does. It
Yeah.
did, and it does, Karen. And that's why I asked the question: have we, as educators, or mental health, or even families and parents, have we ever been the cause of an adverse childhood experience that a student might go through. And that is something very powerful and something for us to think about as a community, especially as we start, our school years.
A lot of times it's magnified, for our kids that are neurodivergent.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And a lot of times when it is magnified, like you were just saying, they don't always have the language to say that's what it is.
Right.
Right. So as the world changes, so does our understanding. So does the perceptions and our understanding of our students. Right. The level of anxiety is high right now around our country and around the world. Like all of us, as one's anxiety, depression, and mood is constantly going up and down, our stamina for other activities is constantly going up and down as well. I think sometimes educators and families forget that students, I believe, they really do try to hold it together during the day. And we have a lot of students that hold it together, and then at home, what happens? They might break down. They might, right. So this is real. It's really happening to families and to students. We think our clients don't notice, but they do. They notice what's happening around us. Some are acting out more in class. Others are internalizing and masking how they're feeling. Karen, I've been told this a lot, Dr. Chris. Sometimes I can't find the words to say how I feel, so I don't say anything. Karen, when that builds up over time, that is absolutely a concern of mine. And it's something that, I do think we should continue to think about addressing and ensuring that students have a safe person and a safe place to go to in their lives when they're feeling that way.
So you've spent a great deal of time thinking about social development and what social really means to autistic people and our neurodiverse population. How do you work on social at your center, and what advice do you have for teachers and parents on this topic?
Well, I love thinking about social, and I love thinking about social development, especially in adolescence and childhood. Karen, one of the things that we tend to operate in boxes sometimes when it comes to interventions. I have been sitting in meetings and people say, well, social skills should only be done by the speech pathologist, or social skills should only be done by the school psychologist or social worker. We need to break down those barriers. We need to recognize that when we have a student in our classrooms, in our special education classrooms, those are prime times. Those are great times to be working on different concepts related to social. And thinking outside the box, although this is not necessarily new thinking, one of the ways we at the center kind of tackle social and think about social is through the lens of executive functioning. Executive functioning is a buzzword right now, and everybody's talking about it and what that means. But when you think about deficits in planning and organizing and shifting and emotional regulation, right, flexibility, all of those things impact a person's social function. So it's not just about how do you start a conversation with somebody and giving somebody scripts to start a conversation. For some individuals, that's great, and that's maybe what they need. For others, it's tackling the why, and how do I plan it all out? One of the things we need to do is we need to stop teaching eye contact and create a system to teach the value in sharing exchanges. So I talk about sharing exchanges more than I do talking about eye contact. Because when you and I are exchanging glances, and we're connecting, through our eyes or non-verbally, we're doing just that, connecting. And we don't talk about that enough, I don't think, when trying to address social deficits, But take the time to think about how to embed some of these executive function strategies into your everyday teaching and counseling practices or social skill, lessons.
Mm-hmm.
You know, um, practice the uncomfortable. I just met with a family a little while ago, Karen, that has an older child, and the child really struggles with being uncomfortable. And so what the family does is the family does everything in their power to keep him feeling comfortable. But I have to ask the question though, is that real life?
No.
If we are not focusing on how to help people be comfortable with the uncomfortable, we're not really doing what we need to do to help them move forward, into their day-to-day lives.
That's true.
Social means something different to all people, and that's okay. What social means to me, and I can give you a definition for social and how I've kind of conceptualized social. But what I'm learning, and it's through working with our neurodivergent, population, is that sometimes, it's okay to have one friend. It's okay to have, to feel part of a community online.
Yeah, exactly.
When I started and when I really, 10, 12 years ago, when this online notion of friends and, online communities came up, I saw this whole big kind of fury of, well, how can people have friends online? It doesn't make any sense.
And here we are.
And here we are. And I have to ask the question of who are we to say it's not okay to have relationships and to have friendships, and maybe it's different. And I think that's what scares people, right, Karen? It's different. It's not what we had when we were growing up. So therefore, it makes it a little bit different. So Karen, when I think about social and I think about social and how we teach it, it's about helping people to adapt. It's about helping people to take risks. And it's about being okay with social failure. It's okay to let our kids experience some of those things because that's real life, Karen, and that is what we're hoping that we're preparing them to do.
Exactly.
Make sense?
Oh yeah, totally. Okay. I understand you're a parent of 2 neurodiverse children. What is it like in terms of your professional work? And what have your kids taught you about one's neurodiverse brain?
Ooh, question. I love this picture because it's exactly what they have taught me. Some things I'm learning are very clear. I can understand sometimes why my son thinks the way he does or how he processes the way he does. There are other times when things just get too much. It gets too blurry. I can't see it. Kind of like I can't see right now as the sun is going through my shades here, Karen. They've taught me to continue to look to try to find that clarity. They have having 2 students who are neurodiverse, 2 kids that are neurodiverse, going through school right now in the public schools, have given me a better appreciation of working with their school team and being a collaborative partner with them, as opposed to just being adversarial or as opposed to always, fighting. They've taught me to listen to what they're seeing and what they're feeling in class. Because they have 2 very different stories, my son and daughter, and they are both very hard workers, but how they work hard is different. And it's not better, it's not worse, it's not bad, it's just different how they work hard. Because their brains are different, because their brains only have a certain level of capacity each. And I think lastly, what has this taught me about the neurodiverse brain? It's about to celebrate it.
Mhm.
It's about really understanding that okay, they think differently. They read words differently. They understand things differently. It takes them a little longer to process things. That's okay. It doesn't mean they're not going to get there.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean they're not going to get there. And I think for me as a parent, Karen, that is huge to remember because I take that into my clinical work
Mhm.
and say that doesn't mean your son or daughter is not going to get there. It might take them a little bit longer. Their path might be a little bit different. Um, but you know what? As long as they're feeling good about themselves,
Mhm.
that's the most important thing to me. As long as they're feeling good about themselves and we continue to work on their self-esteem and celebrate, even when they fail, even when they don't succeed all the time, celebrate the fact that they're working hard and trying. That's really what they have taught me, and I hopefully have brought that into my clinical work as well.
Yeah, that's what I see with mine too. Is they are so different. Kids are so different. Neurodiversity is so diverse.
That it is.
It really is. And to celebrate the differences.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And then what you said earlier, we need to remember the differences, that differences are not deficits. I love that quote. That's very important.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, these are really gems, beautiful, beautiful gems. Where do you see education needing to go if we're going to really understand and accept our neurodiverse learners for the people they are and the talents that they have?
Well, that's a good question. It's a big question. That's a systems
Yes.
question. Um, from my standpoint, and for what it's worth, education needs to focus more on creating independent learners
Mhm.
who are not scared of the productive struggle.
Hmm.
And the productive struggle is real. It is allowing students to try things out and not be successful, but not shame,
Okay.
but not shame, and not criticize and not critique in a way that doesn't allow the student to get back up and try again. Whether we and I'm absolutely not. I'm saying that teachers are not doing this on purpose. However, we are in a system right now that we want our kids to be right. You know, because in our heads, if our students are right, that means we're doing a great job teaching,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so then if our scores are good, right? If our scores are
Right.
good, that's a reflection on me as a teacher. So that means I'm doing something good. It's not all about scores. It's not all about getting things right on the first try. It's about being able to sustain within that productive struggle.
Mm-hmm.
We need to help parents and educators believe in creating active learners
Mm-hmm.
who can self and cognitively regulate through different times.
Mm-hmm.
If our students can't self-regulate
Mm-hmm.
and know how to move towards a certain goal, right? And it involves a lot. Moving towards a certain goal, moving towards achieving something, takes a lot of cognitive power, like metacognition and self-motivation, active participation
Mm-hmm.
towards that goal or habit. We're talking a lot about creating new habits. If we're not helping students move in that direction, Karen, then we're doing a big disservice to our kids today.
It's,
Um, And that is something I think we as an education system, that's something that, for instance, in our graduate programs, we need to do a better job in talking about how, as a teacher, are you helping your students become an independent learner
mm-hmm.
and move through that kind of productive struggle.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Cognitive self-regulation is the process of engaging in behaviors that helps one learn. And if you can sustain your cognitive regulation and become an active participant in your own learning, you know, that is huge. let's talk about vocational things. Let's talk about entering adulthood. We have a whole another day on, transition and vocation, and work, employment.
Mm-hmm.
These are those things, Karen, that's going to help drive our students, all students,
Mm-hmm.
in that direction. But it's also something else, and almost at a more basic level, Karen.
Mm-hmm.
It is finding your students' strengths, taking a step back. What is my student good at? What do they know about? What are they passionate about? Are they passionate about Mario Brothers? Are they passionate about cars? And do they know? I have one client who is a huge car fan,
Mm-hmm.
right? Can tell me all about different types of cars and Toyotas in particular, right? And so, how do we use that
Mm-hmm.
in teaching? Are they an athlete? You know, those are things that we need to really be thinking about and identifying in our students, because if we're not, then it's going to be even harder for them to be able to get through that kind of productive struggle.
No, I think that's great. Focus on the gifts, focus on what they're good at and what they want to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. You know, the other thing I'm thinking about schools and education, is creating learning partnerships with families.
Mm-hmm.
If I think sometimes, and I just spoke about this earlier today, creating family partnerships, sometimes we're hesitant to invite the conversation. Sometimes we're hesitant as schools and educators to ask questions, certain questions. However, building that trust, building those relationships with families, that is absolutely key to helping, to move our education system along, and helping our neurodiverse students as well as all students that we see in schools.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we don't have those learning partnerships with families, families are going to be the expert on their child.
For sure.
And I say that all the time. I yes, okay, so I have a couple letters after my name, and I've been doing this for some time, but I absolutely celebrate the knowledge and the insight families have for their child. And if I don't hear their story, if I don't value that, Karen,
Mm-hmm.
then I am not doing all that I can be doing, for my client.
Plus, they're
Does
going
that
to
make sense?
go, yes, they're going to be there the longest period of time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, so what are the next steps? Education and the need for relationships, trust. Trust in schools come down to the one thing, and this is the feeling of connection. Families have to feel connected to their school,
Mm-hmm.
have to feel connected to their teams. They have to trust their teams, Karen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I know that's sometimes difficult to do. I know that it is difficult to sometimes give some of that up.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to. Students and staff need to experience the safety, right? To speak one's mind, to discuss with openness and honesty what is and isn't working,
Mm-hmm.
and then make collaborative decisions to take risks and sometimes to even fail, Karen.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to try things, and maybe you're not too certain if it's going to succeed. If you do it in a collaborative type of way, that could really be impactful.
Oh, yeah.
Educational reform must start with improving trust. And this idea of being heard and being seen. And Karen, I'll also go as far as to say this includes our neurodiverse students.
Oh, for sure.
Well, and sometimes, families sit around the table and educators sit around the table, and we have these adults making these decisions and conversations. We can't forget about the stories and the insight our learners have
Yeah.
on them. That's a big one. That's a big one.
Very important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Karen, I appreciated all of these wonderful questions and this opportunity to share a few thoughts, but just to kind of wrap it up,
Mm-hmm.
these continue to be very stressful days for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Stress is high. Teachers are working the hardest they've worked. They are doing the best jobs that they can do.
Mm-hmm.
We need to continue to support our educators because our educators are also under a great deal of stress.
For sure.
Um, and we can manage this storm with the right supports, mindsets, and permissions. We have to give permission to feel. We have to give permission to our students to tell us how they're feeling, even when they're feeling really kind of down and crappy. We have to give ourselves permission to
Mm-hmm.
say how we're feeling on certain days. Because I don't know about you, Karen, but there are certainly some days when, you know what, I'm having a rough day.
Right.
It happens to all of us,
We all
you
do.
know?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So let's all be that agent of change our
Mm-hmm.
students and our kids need right now. And we got to remember to also take care of ourselves. Because and just like I say to with families and parents, if you're not taking care of yourself, if you're not giving yourself a little downtime, Karen, if you don't put yourself in timeout every now and then, right? You're not gonna be in the place you want to be in to really help support your family and your child. You know. Um, Karen, I thank you and I thank the summit for putting this on, for allowing me to blab my thoughts for a few minutes. But this has been wonderful chatting with you.
This has been great, Chris. This has really, really been great. You have a wealth of information, and it's going to help so many families. I know one of my friends calls it Shuva, Patty Beach. I don't know if you've heard that phrase. Shuva.
No, no.
Shuva is being
Hmm.
seen, heard, understood, valued, and appreciated. It's kind of it's a coined phrase from her, Patty Beach, the art of alignment. Just because it's just so powerful, and it's so much what you're talking about. For people to be seen, heard, understood, valued, and appreciated. Everybody, everybody on the team, and I think that's so important for people that are neurodivergent. The team players, everybody.
Absolutely.
It's a human to human intervention or interaction, that
Absolutely.
we all need to be heard. We all need to be loved and appreciated for who we are. And
Absolutely.
what you're doing is great. It's right on point.
Thank
And,
you, Karen. Thank you. I appreciate that.
and especially, with what the hard times that we're having as teachers, like you guys have a difficult role, especially in this day and age with all the trauma and things that are going on. It's probably a
Hey.
lot harder than it was when I was growing up. I'm
It's
still
definitely
growing up, but
right. Absolutely. No,
probably.
it is different. It is, and again, my kids, my three at home, continue to keep me grounded into what's really happening in the schools and
Yeah.
and how students are feeling right now when
Yeah.
we have active shooter drills, in
Oh,
school these days. It's the reality that they face every day,
yeah.
and we have to continue to be aware of that.
So thank you for the work that you're doing. And thank you for the wonderful presentation. It was great. It was really, really good. And
I
I'm sure.
appreciate you, and I appreciate all the World Summit is doing, and Autism Today, and I appreciate everything. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay. And how can people get in touch with you?
So my email address is simple. It's chris@sociallearningcenter.org. Feel free to drop me an email or follow us on our social media pages. And again, it's been a pleasure, and I thank everybody for watching. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the summit.
Okay. Thank you very much.